Site for Wight Employment Tribunal Report by Miriam Tong, CEO. Read by Chris Kane, Marketing, Communications and Fundraising Manager. As reported at the March 2018 AGM, the trustees agreed to review in May their previous decision regarding the historic accidental overpayment of a former employee. At the May 2018 meeting of trustees, the decision was made that further legal advice was required, and this was sought. Whilst a full report and advice is currently awaited from the local solicitors approached, preliminary advice was that it might be possible to make a claim for some of the accidental overpayment. However, because of an employment tribunal claim being pursued by the former employee for constructive dismissal, unpaid wages, and for accrued but untaken holiday, the legal advice of our HR advisors was that the Society should not actively pursue such action whilst the employment tribunal claim was ongoing. Prior to the commencement of the employment tribunal process, the claimant had sought redress through ACAS, seeking a payment of £3,800 to settle her claims. The Society declined entering into such a settlement as it did not support the claims made. The Employment Tribunal hearing took place in Southampton on the 11th and 12th of June 2018, and the judgment of the Employment Tribunal judge was received by the Society on the 13th of July 2018. All of the claimant's spurious claims have been dismissed, and the Society has been completely vindicated. Details of the Employment Tribunal can now be shared, as all Employment Tribunal judgments are published online in the public domain. www.gov.uk/employment-tribunal-decisions. Preparation for the Employment Tribunal created a significant workload, and the trustees, myself and the staff team are delighted that all claims made were dismissed, meaning that time, effort and energy can once again be entirely devoted to taking the charity forward for the benefit of islanders affected by sight loss. As the Employment Tribunal process has now been concluded, during the forthcoming August 2018 meeting, the trustees will review their initial decision not to seek repayment of the salary overpayment. By this time, the full report and legal advice regarding the possibility of seeking repayment is expected. Following the August meeting of trustees, it is hoped that a decision can be reached in the best interest of the charity that will draw a line under the regrettable matter of the salary overpayment. Miriam Tong, CEO.
Good morning, this is Pauline.
And Brian.
And we start today with the Society news for Friday the 27th of July. On Tuesday there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society. The first in the West Wight at the End of the Line Cafe, Yarmouth from 10:30 to 12 noon, and the second in Bembridge at the Cloisters from 10:15 to 12 noon. Please go along and support these if you are able. The swimming group will be meeting this coming Tuesday evening, 31st of July, at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. The swimming group has sole use of the pool during the session, and there are lifeguards in attendance. If you are interested in joining the group, please contact the Society to advise us of your swimming ability and for us to advise the Waterside Pool.
Any other news? Please note there will be no activities taking place at Millbrook House throughout August. All groups will restart in September. Site for Wight will be attending the Trail Show on the 4th and 5th of August. Staff and volunteers will be there with a selection of visual aids, providing information on the Society and selling our promotional items, including our sunglasses. If you're attending the show, please come and say hello. A bucket collection is being held in aid of Site for Wight at Freshwater Co-op on Saturday 28th of July between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. To support our recruitment drive for volunteers, we will be advertising our vacancies on a regular basis in the hope that you may have a friend, relative, neighbour or contact who could be interested in volunteering with the Society. We have approximately 85 active volunteers who support the Society in many ways to provide the services we offer to our members. Our volunteer team are committed to their volunteer roles and have fun and social interaction along the way, which is of mutual benefit to everyone involved. Current vacancies are minibus drivers, dress for less retail support, escorts on our minibus, events ambassadors to support at island-wide events, fundraising by way of bucket collections at island supermarkets, sighted guides for our monthly and varied island walks, My Guide sighted guide escorts. Please contact Michelle Taylor, Volunteer Manager, on 522205 or email volunteers@iwsb.org.uk for further details. The Freshwater Audio Book Group will not be meeting this month. The next group will be held on Tuesday 28th of August at Freshwater Library. For more details, please contact Freshwater Library on 752377.
Now we move on to the scaffolding news. We're unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Starting with Bay and Ventnor area. There is currently scaffolding at Premier Inn, 1-9 Esplanade, Sandown, 11A and 11B St John's Road, Sandown, the Toy Master, 103 High Street, Sandown. The scaffold is actually up in Albion Road, United Reformed Church, High Street, Shanklin, Bar 64, that's High Street, Shanklin, corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road, Ventnor, Boniface Road and into Trinity Road, Ventnor, Hose Road, Dixon, 1 High Street, Ventnor, 2 Eleanor House, Grove Road, Ventnor. There are currently hoardings at Premier Inn, 1-9 Esplanade, Sandown, United Reformed Church, High Street, Shanklin. There are currently skips at 27 Clarendon Road, Shanklin and 11A Steep Hill Court Road, Ventnor. New scaffolding is due up at 1 Station Avenue, Sandown, and that's from the 6th of August. Railway Bridge Avenue Road, Sandown, from the 10th of September. New skips are due at adjacent Coastal Mobility, 56 Regent Street, Shanklin, from the 6th of August. 3 Clarence Road, Shanklin, from the 7th of August.
Cowes area. There is currently scaffolding at 91 High Street, Cowes, 93 High Street, Cowes, behind hoarding, 78 Park Road, Cowes. There are currently hoardings at 93 High Street, Cowes. There are currently skips at 101 Palance Road, Northwood, 40 Vectis Road, East, Cowes.
And in the Newport area, there is currently scaffolding at 18 Lugley Street, Newport, 46 to 48 Lugley Street, Newport, Braunston House, Lugley Street, Newport, Domino's, St James's Street, Newport, Unit 2, 32 to 39 High Street, Newport, Hurst & Son, Lugley Street, Newport. The scaffolding is up in Lugley Street and Holyrood Street. Age UK, 145 High Street, Newport, 114 Pyle Street, Newport, and 82 to 86 Carisbrook High Street, Newport.
Ryde area. There is currently scaffolding at 4 St Michael's Avenue, Ryde, Boots, 170 High Street, Ryde, McColl's, 47 to 48 Union Street, Ryde, Hills Court, High Street and Newport Street, Ryde, 18 George Street, Ryde, 23 St John's Road, Ryde, West End, 34 John Street, Ryde, oversailing in Newport Street, 12 The Anchorage, Sea View. There are currently skips at 39 Harding Road, Ryde, 31 Osborne Road, Ryde. New scaffolding is due at due up at 73 George Street Ryde from the 6th of August.
In the West Wight area, there is currently scaffolding at Jojo's, School Green Road, Freshwater, currently skips at Williams Court, the Broadway, Totland, and a new skip is due at Flat A, Bourne House, Church Hill, Totland from the 7th of August.
This week's In Touch. In Touch, in this week's episode, a UK standard for assistance dogs. The government is looking at options for a new UK standard, which would give business owners like shops and restaurants more clarity about what qualifies as an assistance dog. What will it mean for blind and visually impaired people? At present, there's no plan to make the public access assessment scheme compulsory, and dogs supplied by the organisation Guide Dogs will already reach the standard. So why is the change needed? Peter talks to Peter Gorbing, the chair of Assistance Dogs UK, an organisation which is being consulted by the government about the best way to proceed. We also hear from writer and broadcaster Red Sell on his latest challenge, an extreme blind triathlon made possible by being one of the winners of the prestigious Holman Prize. And we're asking for your help. Science fiction is infused with stories about blindness and visual impairment. We want to hear what has intrigued or inspired you. Presented by Peter Wight, produced by Kevin Call.
Now we move on to the county press, and we start with the headlines. The first headline is "Rape My Wife, Man is Jailed." A husband took revenge on his estranged wife by setting up a fake Facebook profile to encourage other men to rape her. A court heard Adrian Wilkes, 45, of Osborne Road, Shanklin, set up a fake Facebook profile in his spouse's name and invited a man who responded to it to rape her in her car. Wilkes was jailed for 8 months after admitting 2 offences of sending a malicious communication when he appeared for sentence at the Isle of Wight Crown Court last Friday. The court was told the offences arose from the breakup of Wilkes' marriage. He had started by sending intimidating sexual texts to his wife under a pseudonym. At first, Mrs. Wilkes believed the texts were a wind-up from one of her friends, said Rod Blaine, prosecuting. But Mrs. Wilkes discovered a Facebook page had been set up in her name with a revealing photograph on the home page. She contacted Facebook and the page was shut down. She also discovered the page had a link to a crudely named website. Mrs. Wilkes contacted Facebook and had that link removed. However, one afternoon, as Mrs. Wilkes was leaving work, she was approached by a man as she was sitting in her car. She wound down her window and the man greeted her by name. He said he'd been speaking to her on the internet but did not know what he was talking about. He said the website gave the registration number of her car, where she worked and the time she was there. Wilkes had posed as his estranged wife on the site, claiming she wanted sex and wanted to be raped as part of a role play. Both the man and Mrs. Wilkes reported what had happened to police. Their investigation revealed Wilkes had set up the fake account, said Mr. Blaine. In a victim impact statement, Mrs. Wilkes said what had happened still haunted her, and she'd become hypervigilant, had difficulty sleeping and suffered from feelings of dread. The court was told Wilkes was of previous good character. For Wilkes, Elizabeth Busey-Jones said her client understood the enormity of what he had done. He'd been a family man who had snapped due to the circumstances of the breakup of his marriage. She told the court Mrs. Wilkes had developed an extreme gambling habit. On one night she had spent £12,000. The family had got into extreme debt and had gone to Mr. Wilkes' parents for a loan. She said he found himself suffering from stress and anxiety. Jailing him, Judge William Ashworth said Wilkes had opened up his estranged wife to risk. The incident had profound effect on her.
The second headline relates to great white sharks, these denizens of the deep. Following last week's report, the Isle of Wight is the 4th best place in the country for spotting sharks. Island anglers have revealed some of their recent catches. Alan Deeming of East Cowes was fishing for place in a competition when he reeled in a rare blue shark. The creature was tagged and returned to the water. Alan, who is Secretary and Publicity Officer of Bembridge Angling Club, said, "We believe it was only the second one ever to have been caught in island waters, with the first one many years ago." Anglers Mike Mongo Mowbray of Godshill and Steve Spragg of Shanklin caught two fearsome-looking thresher sharks when fishing in Steve's boat off the south coast of the island last week. David Beaky Cheall of Binstead, who runs the Whitewater Angling Group on Facebook, said the blue shark was rare for our waters, although they were more common around Wales and Cornwall. He added that despite fears of jaws returning, the fish wouldn't bite swimmers. None of these sharks would go near humans. They are out in 150 foot of water chasing food, he said. The island is one of the best areas for threshers, and this species is the holy grail for shark anglers in the UK. We also get poor beagles. One bit my pollock in half recently, and very rarely blue sharks. Any other fish are really shark relatives and not true sharks, such as the tope I pulled in. All the sharks pictured are returned to the water.
Tributes to Isle of Wight's greatest citizen. Mary Ellis, one of the last living female pilots from the Second World War, has died aged 101. Tributes to Mrs Ellis of Sandown have flooded in from across the country, with Island MP Bob Seeley mourning the loss of the Isle of Wight's greatest citizen. Mrs Ellis was a member of the Air Transport Auxiliary, that's the ATA, and delivered Spitfires and bombers to the front line during the conflict, armed with only a map, a compass and a stopwatch. Her work was vital to more than just the war effort, as she and her colleagues blazed the trail for today's generation of women RAF pilots. Mrs Ellis said she had flown about 1,000 aeroplanes during the war, before moving to the Isle of Wight in 1950 to take charge of Sandown Airport, becoming Europe's first female air commandant. ATA Secretary John Webster described Mrs Ellis, who also founded the Isle of Wight Aero Club, as an amazing person. Earlier this year, she joined the late film director Anthony Minghella, solo yachtswoman Dame Ellen MacArthur, and Hover Travel founder Chris Bland in being granted the freedom of the Isle of Wight. And at the RAF 100 centenary celebrations, she met Prime Minister Theresa May, who gave special mention to her in her opening remarks. Mr Seeley said the Isle of Wight has lost its greatest citizen, and my thoughts are with Mary Ellis's family at this incredibly sad time. Her service in the Air Transport Auxiliary, ferrying aircraft to frontline squadrons throughout the Second World War, is legendary. Mary was truly a heroine, a trailblazer for women, and one who gave so much in defence of our country. Mary Ellis, then Mary Wilkins, joined the ATA in 1941 after hearing an advertisement for women pilots on BBC Radio. She said at the time they were known as the Glamour Girls, adding there were plenty of escorts around. She married Don Ellis, a fellow pilot, in 1961 and continued to live in their marital home beside the runway at Sandown after his death in 2009. Speaking at a surprise party in 2017 for her 100th birthday, held at the airport, Mrs Ellis said the Spitfire had always been her favourite aircraft. "I love it, it's everybody's favourite," she said. "I think it's a symbol of freedom." Lincolnshire's Lancaster Association posted online, "Her stories and way of telling them brought so much life to her exploits. Rest in peace." Red Arrow flyer Mike Ling posted on Twitter, "Mary was a legend of the Air Transport Auxiliary." RAF Cosford said on Facebook, "Blue skies, ma'am, and thank you for your service to our country." Meanwhile, Isle of Wight Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, said, "I've now asked council officers to look at appropriate ways in which we can further recognise her remarkable life."
Hot weather halts historic wheel. The donkey wheel at Carisbrooke Castle has been taken out of service during the heat wave, but it is not the donkeys that are too hot, it is the wheel itself. The hot days have caused the 431-year-old wooden wheel to dry out, leaving it vulnerable to damage. Staff at the castle have had to mist the wheel with water several times a day so it can absorb some moisture, and the donkeys have not been allowed to walk on it. This is not the first time the wheel has had to be taken out of service due to weather conditions, and it's been done to keep the historic wheel in good condition. Stable manager at Carisbrooke Castle, Hannah Brewer, said, "The wheel is a 431-year-old piece of working historical equipment. As with any equipment that is in regular use, it does require some maintenance from time to time. The heat can affect the wheel, and this isn't the first time we have briefly been unable to operate as usual. The wheel is highly dependent on environmental factors, and sometimes we have to force and replicate these conditions to keep it healthy. Currently, it is receiving a dousing of misty water 3 to 4 times a day so it can absorb the moisture. We have a very good relationship with our wheelsmith, and collaboratively we are working to keep this wonderful product of our history in a healthy condition for many years to come. The donkeys are thinking animals, and as such need enrichment in order to cure boredom and maintain a healthy state of mind. So when the well house is cool enough, we are still taking them into the building itself. They are a little confused not to be able to step onto the wheel though. We are still running talks at scheduled times. The only difference is we are unable to operate the wheel itself."
Council managers' plan defended. A £400,000 management shake-up at County Hall has been defended by senior councillors who claimed key departments, including housing and highways, have been decimated by staff shortages. Independent Labour councillor Jeff Brodie called on the Isle of Wight Council to rethink the restructure, branding it an insult to council taxpayers following tax hikes and service cuts, but was voted down at last Wednesday's full council meeting by 21 votes to 11 with 1 abstention. As reported, the council intends to appoint an assistant chief executive on a £92,000 salary and strategic managers for highways and transportation and planning and infrastructure who will be paid £90,000. Graduate trainees will also be recruited and senior staff given pay rises. Councillor Ian Ward said, "I'm the cabinet member for highways and I don't have a head of highways. I've got 1 highways officer and a list of 2,000 issues the public wants sorted out." Council leader Councillor Dave Stewart reiterated senior staff were needed to turn the council around. He said, "We want the public to understand why we think this is the right move forward. We have a duty to provide clear leadership and clear direction to get this council out of the financial mess it's in and take it forward to a place where we can all be proud of what we're doing. Commercialisation, that's where we have to go. Digitalisation, that's where we're moving to." Sounding a warning to council boss John Metcalfe, who superheaded the restructure, Councillor Stewart said, "We've given the chief executive the tools to do the job. If he doesn't do it, he doesn't have a job. He's on probation in that sense." He said cabinet members had been involved in the restructure, prompting criticism from Councillor Brodie that political decisions were being taken behind closed doors. "There was no consultation with the Isle of Wight community. This decision stinks," he said.
Anger over tent accident. Isle of Wight Pride has launched an investigation after a marquee run by the Scouts blew over, injuring spectators during Saturday's event. Colin McCourt from East Cowes told the county press he and his wife had joined the parade and were passing the Scout marquee when a gust of wind lifted it into the air, knocking a number of people to the ground, including Mrs. McCourt. His wife suffered cuts to her head, arm, both legs and feet, while a friend was taken to hospital with a suspected fractured elbow. Mr McCourt praised the on-site medical team for their help, but said the incident had caused the couple to miss the rest of the event. He said, "The medical team are to be applauded, but the same cannot be said of the Pride organisers. Having a large marquee structure not tied down on a seafront position was completely wrong, and any form of risk assessment should have corrected this error. This could have been so much worse. 2 women were catapulted onto concrete pavements and have only bumps and bruises. No children were involved, which, given the number in the arena, was a miracle." A spokesperson for Isle of Wight Pride said, "Isle of Wight Pride can confirm during the event on Saturday a scout gazebo came loose and was lifted by a gust of wind, causing minor injuries to 4 people watching the event. The incident was dealt with quickly and professionally by Pride volunteers and the medical staff on site. All involved were very well looked after by the medical team, and the incident cleared within 15 minutes, allowing the event to continue." Matt Bundy from Isle of Wight Pride had made contact with those who suffered cuts and bruises to check on their welfare and recovery, and has ensured the incident will be fully investigated. A spokesman for Isle of Wight Scouts added, "We're working with the event organisers to establish what happened in this case. We wish those who sustained cuts and bruises a rapid recovery."
One of the brightest young rowing talents the island has produced for many years, Daisy Faithfull, has won double gold representing England at the home international regatta in Ireland. The 18-year-old member of Sandown Shanklin Rowing Club added to her long list of successes this season at the event in Cork at the weekend. The Sandown Bay Academy student of Bembridge, up against top rowers from Scotland, Wales and host Ireland, was part of the successful junior women coxed 4 against Scotland, winning by almost 7 seconds, having led from the starting gun. Sponsored by the Isle of Wight Council's talented athletic programme, Daisy followed it up with another win in the junior women's 8, but it was a lot tighter as England scraped home by the narrowest of margins in 6 hours 50 minutes 16 seconds, a second and a half over the Irish team, their nearest challengers. Her successes are the next step up in her development, a result of hard work on her technique and strength during more than 8 months of trials, which has led to notable regatta successes for SSRC this season. Irish commentators at the home international regatta said England's junior women quads and 8s were the best drilled in the event. Daisy was delighted with both results.
Car park idea revisited. The controversial idea of building a multi-storey car park in Cowes has been resurrected. It is part of a proposal for a huge project to transform the town's harbour into a mini Gunwharf Quays. At a meeting of Cowes Town Council last Thursday, Councillor John Nicholson asked members to throw their weight behind proposals, first revealed in the county press, which could see the town's harbour area turned into a luxury shopping centre. However, councillors backed away from fully endorsing the proposals before they had a clearer idea what the project involved. As reported in March 2017, the proposals involve rebuilding the harbour area known as Town Quay between the Red Jet Terminal and Cowes Yacht Haven, and improving the transport interchange at Fountain Yard. The idea was floated in 2016 by the former Mayor of Cowes, Jeff Banks, and involves input from Cowes Harbour Commission, Red Funnel, the Isle of Wight Chamber of Commerce and Town Council. Councillor Nicholson said Cowes was at risk of decline if the development did not go ahead. He said, "This is incredibly important." He added, a multi-storey car park had not been ruled out of the regeneration scheme. However, Councillor Wendy Wardrop reminded members of a proposal 15 years ago which had included building a multi-storey car park in Cross Street. Around 5,000 residents signed a petition against the proposal. Councillor Lynn Hammond said, "We need something done, but not to the detriment of residents." Cowes Mayor, Councillor Paul Fuller, agreed that a lot of ill feeling had been created in the town 15 years ago by the previous proposals. Members agreed to hold a special meeting involving all stakeholders.
The Duchess of Cornwall met Dame Judi Dench for an ice cream on Queen Victoria's private beach at Osborne House on Tuesday. The royal and the Oscar winner could be seen enjoying a catch-up over a vanilla ice cream from Island Business Plaza Ices. The actress, who is a patron of Friends of Osborne House, showed Camilla around the estate. A highlight of the tour was the newly restored Durbar Room, one of the locations for the film Victoria and Abdul, in which Miss Dench played Queen Victoria. Later, at Trinity Landing, Cowes, the Duchess officially named Red Funnel's new Red Jet 7, watched by hundreds of well-wishers, including 300 children, school children, who gathered on the parade.
Jim has packed a full life into his 100 years. A former photographer, entertainer and soldier who survived a bomb explosion during the Second World War has celebrated his 100th birthday. Jim Lane of Norton near Yarmouth was joined by Joan, his wife of 61 years, friends and neighbours at a party at their home. He was born in Rugby, where his father ran a hosiery shop, but he took to the stage at an early age. Jim said, "My mother sent me to dancing lessons where I learned ballroom, tap and stage dancing. When I was around 12, I auditioned for a pantomime, Toad of Toad Hall, which played for more than 3 weeks over Christmas at the Lyric Theatre, Shaftesbury Avenue, and spent time at a boarding house in Holland Road, West London, learning about the stage. The following year, I was back in the same panto, this time at the Savoy Theatre at the Strand. Around this time, my father bought an apartment house in Kensington, so we moved down and rented out the rooms, with me helping out there. Jim was called up for the army at the start of the war and trained in guns in Hull for 6 months before being sent to Shrivenham, Oxfordshire, for 3 months officer training, where he became a second lieutenant. He had a group of around 30 men under his charge, who were sent all over the country to train other soldiers in guns and bombs. Jim spent much of the time in London when it was under bombardment. It was during this time he had a miraculous escape. He said, "I was in Lincolnshire training a group of 8 or 9 soldiers on how to use a Mills bomb, a type of hand grenade. One of the soldiers accidentally set one off, and it exploded, killing everyone except me. I spent months in hospital recovering from shrapnel wounds." After the war, Jim became a reporter and photographer, working for Billy Butlin in holiday camps around the country, writing articles to publicise top acts appearing there. He also made films to promote the resorts. Among the stars he met were Laurel and Hardy, Cary Grant, Dame Vera Lynn and Jessie Matthews. Over the next few years he worked for Coca-Cola as a training manager, using his photographic and film skills to write, produce and star in training films for its staff. He also used those skills at Kraft Foods, where he became its training manager when he was about 40. It was also where he met Joan. He later returned to Coca-Cola in the same role before retiring aged 62. It was around this time he and Joan moved to the island, where they had a sailing boat. but it wasn't long before they were off on a round-the-world trip lasting several months, visiting Fiji, Australia, Hawaii and America. Jim and Joan, 92, continued to sail and travel over the years, and Jim was a former racing officer at the Royal Solent Yacht Club.
6 key sites on the Isle of Wight have been primed for regeneration by the Isle of Wight Council. The Council launched its Regeneration strategy last week, which aims to create more jobs, build better housing and create a better quality of life for island residents. The strategy focuses on Camp Hill, Ryde Gateway, Newport Harbour, Nicholson Road Ryde, Sandham Middle School and Shanklin Spa. Other improvements focus on island-lined and broadband connectivity. The Council will also decide whether to sell or invest in buildings such as Sandown Town Hall, Ventnor Youth Club and Library, redundant school sites and the Pier Street toilets. An edge of town development would be built on the former Camp Hill prison site, reusing existing buildings. Newport Harbour would be transformed into an iconic waterside development with space for leisure, tourism, retail and commercial space. The strategy estimates 200 to 300 residential units, as well as retail and leisure facilities, could be built on the brownfield land. The Ryde interchange and esplanade would be redeveloped to create a new gateway into the island. Speaking at last week's full council meeting regarding Ryde Esplanade, Councillor Stuart Hutchinson said, "No, we're not going to build blocks of flats that spoil everyone's view. Certainly we need to make sure it's a vibrant and lively seafront, as it's the biggest seafront on the island. We have put proposals forward, we think, which are going to be unacceptable. It's not until you put them forward that you know how unacceptable." He said people's views would be taken into account. Nicholson Road would feature a £2 million commercial and retail development extending the existing business park. The emphasis would be placed on using the site for employment purposes. It would require investment in basic infrastructure such as roads and utility connections, as well as improvements to existing hedgerows and footpaths. Regarding Nicholson Road, Councillor Hutchinson said it's at an early stage, but we've already committed money to put the site into the right state of preparation for developers. The Sandham Middle School site would be developed into an extra care housing development. Shanklin Spa would be redeveloped to create luxury homes and holiday apartment complex with an opportunity to reinstate the spa facilities and link to the cliff lift. Speaking at the launch of the Regeneration strategy, Regeneration Director Chris Ashman said, "Change is needed. With this strategy, we have taken the time to get it right." Isle of Wight Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, said, "In this second year of the Regeneration programme, we are determined to achieve results that benefit the wider economy and community and not just our bank balance."
No plan to move traveller caravans. More than a dozen traveller caravans are on unauthorised sites on the Isle of Wight. New figures show in January all of the 14 Gypsy, Roma and traveller caravans on the island were situated on unauthorised sites without planning permission. All the unauthorised sites were declared to be tolerated by the local authority, meaning no active efforts were being made to move people on. Not tolerated sites include those where a planning enforcement notice has been served or where an injunction has been sought against the encampment. Data released by the Council in 2015, the most recent available, said there were no public permanent sites owned by the Council, no transit sites owned by the Council, 2 private sites with temporary permission, 1 unauthorised site which is the subject of a legal judgment, meaning the residents cannot be moved until a site is built for them, and 10 other observed unauthorised sites on the island. In the 2011 census, 94 people identified themselves as gypsies or Irish travellers on the Isle of Wight, but they are most likely to be living in bricks and mortar accommodation as census forms are only delivered to settled accommodation. Jim Davies from the Traveller movement said, "It is clear the UK has a gypsy and traveller population that has as much right to be here as the rest of society, and this population is not going to go away with more police powers and draconian measures aimed at moving them on."
7 Isle of Wight branches of the Royal British Legion are joining the Great Pilgrimage 90, GP90, a tour of First World War battlefields and cemeteries in France and Belgium next month. Members from County, Cowes, Ryde, Shanklin, Newport, Ventnor and Bryston will commemorate the 90th anniversary of the Great Pilgrimage, which took place a decade after the end of the war. Veterans and war widows visited the battlefields of the Somme and Ypres before marching to the Menin Gate in Ypres on August the 8th, 1928. It would be the biggest membership event in the history of the Legion, attended by 1,164 wreath layers and standard bearers from all over the world. Bryston will be represented by Welfare Officer Pearl Adams and standard bearer Charlotte Atkinson, whose father Peter will also be there as county standard bearer. Pearl said, "I brought our wreath into Bryston School to show the children and gave them a talk about the event. Our card on the wreath will have the Patrick O'Donnell quote, 'When you go home tonight, tell them of us and say for your tomorrow we gave our today.'" The school dedication then reads from all the children and staff at Bryston C.of.E. Primary School. Love, courage, respect. Dave Greenwood and Terry Clarkson, branch chairman, will represent the Ryde branch and the local community at the event as standard bearer and wreath layer. Year 6 pupils at Greenmount Primary School Ryde have entered a competition to write their sentiments on the card which accompanies the wreath. These will be judged on Monday by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor of Ryde. Mr Clarkson said, "Great Pilgrimage 90 is a unique opportunity for the Legion community to come together and bear our standards along the same route in Ypres, taken 90 years earlier by the veterans and widows of the First World War. The Ryde branch looks forward to proudly representing Ryde at the event." The visit finishes on August the 8th with a parade to the Menin Gate, where a wreath from each branch will be placed on the memorial.
Homeschooling. When 15-year-old Lucy Challis began to dread going to school, her mum signed her up to an online high school. Mum Tesney is just one of a growing number of parents choosing to home educate, but instead of teaching herself, Lucy attends Inter High, where her classes are all online. In May, it was reported a higher proportion of children are home educated on the Isle of Wight than anywhere else in the country. Nationally, home education has risen by 40% in 3 years. Classes start at 9:30 a.m. when Lucy logs onto her laptop. A teacher leads the class via video link, and a chat box alongside allows the pupils to communicate, although they can private message the teacher if they need to. Interactive presentations also allow the 20 students to get involved, and all lessons are recorded, allowing students to go back over them at any time. At 9:20 a.m, an alarm sounds to let us know lessons are about to start. Then teachers come on the webcam and we can follow along the lesson, she said. Lucy, who lives in Brading, studies one subject a day and is studying 5 GCSEs, science, maths, French, geography and English. Tesney said Lucy began high school but began to find behavioural issues in the class meant she was unable to concentrate on her work. Suffering with severe chest problems, Lucy also had a high non-attendance rate. Many of the students at Inter High are international. Lucy said her best friend at school lives in Slovenia. Young actors or children whose parents travel attend the school as a way to keep up with lessons while on the go. Tesney said, "Lucy has done a maths lesson at the Isle of Wight festival before. She's missing less school now than she was before because it doesn't matter if we are travelling or not at home. She can just log in to attend lessons. Lessons are not affected by teacher training days or snow days. Students meet up annually for a whole school trip and leavers attend a celebration in the summer." Lucy said the school was very social, with interactions taking place using Snapchat and WhatsApp. She also attends dance classes once a week and has performed at the London Palladium and at the Isle of Wight Festival. She said, "Last year we had a weekend at PGL, which everyone went to. I met up with my friends from around the world." Lucy now has ambitions of attending a dance college on the mainland when she finishes her GCSEs this summer. The school costs the family £270 a month, or just over £3,000 a year. Tesney said what it provides is excellent value for money. She said, "It may cost, but I don't have to pay for transport, uniform or any other cost. We have longer holidays because our hours spent in class are more productive." She added, "I don't think we would be where we are with Lucy were it not for Inter-High."
A community has spoken of its shock after a teenager was stabbed twice in the back in the early hours of the morning in Cowes. 18-year-old Travis Whittington remains in hospital following Tuesday's attack, which has shaken residents. Police and the ambulance service were called to an alley off Windmill Close near Love Lane at around 12:30 a.m. Mr Whittington, who lives in Cowes, had sustained 2 stab wounds to the back and was taken to St Mary's Hospital, Newport. His injuries are not thought to be life-threatening. Police confirmed yesterday 4 men, all aged 23, had been arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm with intent. 2 have been released under investigation and 2 remain in custody. Messages from friends on Travis's Facebook read, "We all love you, Trav, get better soon. What's wrong with people? So sorry, Trav. And we're all thinking of you and wishing for a speedy recovery." Ollie Morris of Windmill Close said, "I think everyone is a little bit on edge. Cowes feels a little bit different now. I didn't think this would happen in this area." Ollie, who is a member of the island band the OMS and works in Cowes Co-op, said he'd spoken to a few local people in the shop. Some of them are a bit shaken up, but most people are hoping it's a once-in-a-blue-moon thing. Another resident said, "Groups congregate along the alley at night, but I've been living here 47 years and nothing like this has ever happened." Another resident said, "I don't know if it's a random thing or if the guy knew the people. It's a good area and we've never really had much trouble, so I don't feel any more vulnerable than before it happened."
And it's goodbye for this week from Brian.
And from Pauline.
It's good morning from Leicester.
And it's good morning from Pauline.
And first of all, we start with our readers' letters. Marquee error from Colin McCourt, East Cowes. My wife and I attended the Pride, taking part in the parade, which was great. And then we entered the arena, where it all went so wrong. We had just passed the Scouts marquee when some wind started the marquee moving. The wind was not very strong, but marquee was lifted into the air before being bowled down the footpath full of people, knocking them into the ground, injuring my wife, her friend, who went to hospital with a suspected broken elbow, and 1 other woman. My wife suffered cuts and abrasions to her head, arm, both legs and feet. She was quickly attended by the paramedics, who then transported her to the medical tent. The medical team gave her a lengthy check-over, and she was allowed to go home so I could monitor her over the next 36 hours. This all meant we missed the Pride event, which we were looking forward to. The medical team are to be applauded, but the same cannot be said of the Pride organisers. Having a large marquee structure not tied down on a seafront position was a completely wrong, and any form of site risk assessment should have corrected this error. This could have been so much worse. 2 women were catapulted onto concrete pavements and have only bumps and bruises. No children were involved, which, given the number in the arena, was a miracle. We were allowed to leave with no one taking details that would allow Pride to contact us, which I assume will be required for an HSE report, which I believe will be necessary. We will be going back next year, but only if it has been shown by the organisers that have dealt with the major risks to the public.
This letter is from Rosie Harrison from Freshwater, and the heading is Great Isle of Wight Asset. Our daughter, with her cohort of third-year commercial music degree students at Platform 1, has recently gained her honours degree endorsed by the University of Chichester. The staff at Platform 1 have a wide range of expertise and professional connections, and they never cease to maximise the many opportunities available to musicians here on the island and further afield. Students are encouraged to meet and perform with professional musicians at a variety of venues, and they benefit from links with many of the major musical events held on the Isle of Wight. Apart from academic support, Platform 1's pastoral care is excellent. Students are treated individually throughout. Ongoing advice and careers guidance helps them all to realise their potential and search out job opportunities appropriate to their own interests and talents within a rapidly developing and multifaceted industry. A local university campus, highly skilled and dedicated tutors who work tirelessly to help all of their students to achieve at the highest level, makes Platform 1 a great asset for the Isle of Wight.
Moral compass, and this is from Phaedra Kelly in Ryde. Why should Councillor Claire Mosdell be obliged to apologise for a joke which was both witty and accurate? The County Press 2007-18. The fact she was proves her victim of a hate crime. Will Matthews angrily demands, in how many countries is it illegal to be Tory? The list: People's Republic of China, Cuba, North Korea and most of the Middle East, where indigenous Tories would be subject to murderous violence more instant than anything a sexual minority might face. Another reactionary demanded that the faith schools should include a wider range of child sex education, but presently parents have a choice not to send their children to faith schools. The Telegraph of July the 20th informs more than 7,920 children permanently excluded from school in the UK period over 12 months, resulting from the child-on-child rape, sexual and physical assault. And since 2013, more than 2,600 reports logged relating to rapes and other sexual offences on school premises, including primary school playgrounds. It appears children are already aware of sex and in need of being dissuaded with a vigorous lesson in how to operate a moral compass.
Chain disaster that just keeps on giving. It's from Joe Nash of Cowes. It seems the Chain Ferry is a story of inefficiency, incompetence, arrogance and stupidity from the start. Within days of the old ferry being taken out of service, all the windows were serviced and had new seals fitted. We have boat builders on the island. We need more employment. We build ferry boats to export, yet the contract for our new chain ferry is given away to a company off the island, which is unfamiliar with our conditions. Who designed it? Was it just for looks? Wasn't tidal drag considered? It's too noisy. The chains snag and jump, and that's not an easy fix. It grounds if not careful. What I can't understand is a complete chain ferry service stoppage just in case a deep vessel passes. This means all regular road vehicles diverted, all fit pedestrians having to climb into an old boat, the less able having to return to a bus stop and spend an hour going the long way round. Why in this day of universal communication is a complete stoppage essential? I don't mind giving a bit to our valuable boating trade, but object to yachts being given absolute preference over a well-used regular road route. Maybe the council does want £400,000 of new managers, but get rid of the managers who make more managers necessary.
This is from Danny McMeacham in Ventnor. When do hospital car park fees begin? I wish to bring to readers' attention the practices of APCOA, which manages car parking at the St Mary's Hospital. I emailed them a number of times and queried when charging commenced after entering the car park. I was prompted to do so after it took me 10 to 15 minutes to find-wait for a parking space. I finally received a response stating there was a 15-minute grace period to allow you to find a space before the charge period commenced. However, this is not correct, as when I entered the car park on June the 20th at 9:28 a.m, that was when the charge commenced. At busy times, visitors could spend up to 10 minutes looking for a space, so I am urging the hospital authorities to take this up.
This letter is entitled Discriminated Against, and it's from S.G. Pryor of Ryde. On the day of the Pride Parade in Ryde, the Isle of Wight Council discriminated against island residents and the disabled. Islanders travelled to watch the parade only to be denied access to facilities unless wearing a designated wristband, which many knew nothing about and which also ran out. A disabled person on a mobility scooter was denied access to the toilets because they did not have a wristband. Residents could not eat at locations they had chosen to visit. People who had driven to watch bowls discovered the games had been cancelled. Fishermen were denied access to their boats. All in all, the council appeared to have more in common with a fascist regime rather than one that was supposed to be supporting individuality. The editor's footnote says that Pride was a ticketed event was well advertised beforehand.
Heroes and Heroines from Alan Osborne in Whippingham. I would like to thank the people who came to my rescue after I had a fall outside Barclays Bank, Newport recently. Having tripped on the pavement edge, I found myself flat out after not being able to recover my balance. Immediately, 3 teenage lads and a worker from Barclays came to my aid. With their help, I was taken into the bank and given first aid and a drink. As my wife was at Specsavers, one of the lads went there and she arrived at the bank with 2 Specsavers assistants. When I had recovered, they accompanied us back to the car park and checked I was okay to drive home. After that, I received some exclusive first aid from my wife, Joanne. Thanks to all those who helped me.
This is headed Reform Needed, and it's from W.H. Bromwich of Cowes. As the NHS celebrates its 70th anniversary, it is rightfully time for reflection. There are 135 acute non-specialist trusts in the United Kingdom, each with a leadership team earning the same as our Prime Minister, and in some cases considerably more. And all this while, many nurses have to rely on food banks. It's a complete absurdity. Frankly, there is something deeply wrong with our society. As substantially more funding for the NHS is announced, the entrepreneurial vultures are circling, ready to snatch and divert public money into the coffers of the private sector. The simple truth is our NHS is currently grossly overmanaged by those with agendas that go way beyond simply providing high-quality healthcare. It requires massive reform at the very top to ensure precious resources and public funding reaches the clinical areas in which it is desperately needed.
This is from Colin Firth in Ryde. It's all a joke. I'm not sure if I feel shame or embarrassment when I read through your pages of the antics of Bembridge Council and the County Press 2007-18. Then I realised it is all a joke. Somebody has found an old script of Monty Python. I think all the people of Bembridge need to sit back and have a rethink. If you are surrounded by the same things every day, you fail to notice what is actually there in front of you. What it needs is when you drive into the village, look at everything with a stranger's eyes, look as though it is the first time you have seen anything at all. When home, ask yourself what needs improving. What has the council done for us in the past? Well, not to mention questionable planning permission. The one thing Bembridge Council has done for the village is made Bembridge the only village in the country where there is not a car park anywhere near the shopping centre. Yet in my time I know of 2 parcels of land offered up for just such a purpose, both to be turned down only later to be built on. I cannot but ask myself, how did this happen? I'm afraid unless something is done, and done quickly, what was a lovely village would soon be known as the backside of the Isle of Wight. Before anybody asks, I was born in the village, as was my mother, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on.
And this letter is headed with a question. Independent Isle of Wight? And it's from Chris Bull of Brook. I'm sorry to disappoint those who read Bob Hurst's recent letter, hoping we are part of France. We are not. By inheritance, the de Fortibus family owned the Isle of Wight in the 13th century. In 1293, Isabella de Fortibus sold the island to the crown for 6,000 marks. 1 mark equalled then 66.5p. Edward I, 1272 to 1307, paid the amount. What happened after that is not clear. Could we not be a crown dependency? If so, we would have the same status as the Channel Islands, independent of the mainland, not part of the EU, with low taxation and able to make our own laws, etc.
And now we move on to looking back, and we start 100 years ago on July the 27th, 1918. A general from Shanklin, who was captured while trying to make his way back to his camp, ended up meeting the Kaiser. He wrote to his wife, "I ran into a barbed wire entanglement, bolted that straight into the line of transport vehicles. I had the unique experience of being sent for by the Kaiser and having a fairly long talk with him." And another piece of news from that date. Princess Beatrice accepted the presidency of the newly formed County Nursing Association by opening a cafe chantant in the grounds of Carisbrooke Castle. A large number of people attended the opening ceremony, where the princess entered to the national anthem with the mayor and the mayoress of Newport.
75 years ago, on July the 24th, 1943, at Knighton, a 29-year-old man disappeared while swimming quite close to the shore. A body was found 4 hours later, just 20 yards from the beach. An onlooker said the sea was quite rough, but said the incident was odd, considering the swimmer had remained in shallow water. And another piece of news. A large number of islanders celebrated the centenary of St John's Church, Oakfield. The church had served the surrounding community well for the century. Military personnel and the mayor and mayoress attended the service. People enjoyed a picnic celebration in the grounds after the service.
And we move on to 50 years ago, and July the 20th, 1968. An island nurse serving in the RAF in Singapore spoke about celebrating the force's 50th anniversary. For Sheila Clark of Cowes, one of only 28 nursing officers serving east of Suez, any day could have brought a summons to board aircraft setting off on mercy flights to pick up sick and injured servicemen. She She said while the prospect of travelling was attractive, there was plenty of routine and rewarding work at the RAF Changai Hospital. And a second piece of news from 50 years ago. More than 130 island children were given a chance to see Bournemouth Symphony's Orchestra at the Guildhall, Portsmouth. The 9 to 11-year-olds joined the civic dignitaries and other guests for the concerts, which were sponsored by fuel distribution company Corrals, which thought it was important for children to see good music.
25 years ago, July the 23rd, 1993, 8-year-old Fern Westmore of Wroxall became the first girl Cub Scout on the island when she was invested into the first God's Hill and Rookley group. She had wanted to become an official Cub ever since she started attending the group. To show she was no different, she chose to wear conventional shorts. She said, "What the boys can do, girls can do." And a second bit of news from 25 years ago. Education bosses were reported to the Ombudsman for alleged maladministration in a row over the number of places available at Sandown High School. As pupils left their middle schools for the summer, some still did not know where they would be taught next term. A number of parents appealed to the Secretary of State about the decision to shrink the year size.
And finally, from the County Press 10 years ago, July the 25th, 2008. A packed public gallery cheered loudly as Isle of Wight council planners rejected a scheme to expand Brambles Holiday Centre. The original plan for Brambles in Monks Lane, Freshwater, brought more than 500 letters of objection. After some amendments, the plans were recommended for approval by officers, but committee members threw them out. And the last piece of news, an island hero saved the life of a heart attack victim using techniques he had seen on TV programmes such as Casualty. Adam Moore, 32, dragged Peter Clark onto the road from his car, where he battled to revive him, twice bringing him back to life before paramedics arrived. He said, "I was slapping him and telling him he wasn't going to die here. I learned basic first aid 13 years ago, but the rest was what I'd seen in films and on television."
Moving on to the first piece, entitled Wight Memories. The heading is Ireland's Maritime History. Do you have memories of the sea to share for a new oral history project? Carisbrooke Castle Museum has been collecting oral histories since 2015, capturing insights into the history of the Isle of Wight. Oral history is all about recording the memories of older people and storing them for future generation. Memories of the Sea, part of the Down to the Coast programme, is funded for 1 year and is being coordinated by Carisbrooke Castle Museum. Museum curators would like to interview people who have made a living from the sea and explore how our island community has been shaped by the sea. This project has a particular focus on the East Wight. There are also opportunities for volunteering as part of the project. For more information, contact Lisa Curley at the museum on 523112.
And the second item from Wight Memories, the church on the edge of the forest. Down a quiet lane, away from the hustle and bustle of Newport Road, stands the parish church of Northwood, St John the Baptist. Before being swallowed into the ever-growing Cowes, Northwood was a small hamlet on the northern edges of the district of Carisbrooke, and the chapel was built to satisfy the spiritual needs of those living so far away from the mother church. Although there was an obvious need for a church closer for those dwelling in the cluster of tiny buildings, and the chapel itself being built in the 12th century, it wasn't until 1486 that the cemetery was consecrated for burials. Until that time, the citizens of Northwood would have had to walk with their dead all the way along the forest tracks to St Mary's Church in Carisbrooke for burial. Even though there have been many later additions and renovations, the Norman origins of St John's are very apparent. The entrance doorway in the south wall with its fine example of Norman chevron pattern brickwork, has been moved from its original position, but in doing so may possibly have been saved from the ravages of weather by the addition of the porch. On the northern arcade, inside are classic examples of Norman columns with their single splay arches. However, the most curious of these ancient items would have to be the original stone font. After going missing for some centuries after renovations, it was found in the churchyard in 1954 and returned into the church. Further renovations to the church took place in the 13th and 15th centuries, with the most restoration undertaken during the Victorian era. During the 15th century, windows were added, 2 of which still remain in the middle of the north aisle and the east end of the south aisle. The interior of the church remains simple and unadorned. There are several stained glass windows that bring light and some grandeur into the church, which is quite beautiful in its simplicity. An ornately carved Jacobean pulpit with canopy, one of many in the island's churches, draws the eye, and the elegant wooden reredos gives a sense of splendour in this otherwise prettily plain church. There are several tablets and memorials around the walls. A brass memorial to those Northwood men falling in the First World War stands on the north wall, with a marble tablet below those for those who died in the Second World War. There are some unusual and ornately carved tablets to note. One of the children of Samuel and Grace Smith is decorated with skulls and other signs of death. Other poignant memorials are placed for infants and remind us how tenuous life was in times past. The current tower and spire are more modern, coming from the restoration in 1864. Before then, the tower is shown as being rather squat and ugly, not at all like the soaring spire of today. It's worth looking around the cemetery with its tree-lined walls and wild flowers. There are some unusual vaulted brickwork tombs that stand out. They were probably made as the local brickworks are so close at hand. St John's is certainly a hidden gem. The surrounding trees make you feel as though you step back in time, and it is once again the church on the edge of Parkhurst Forest. It is obviously well cared for by the congregation and will hopefully welcome visitors for centuries to come.
We now move on to articles entitled My View. The first is by Catherine James, and the heading is Beach Litters Not the Problem Yet. Years ago, a friend and I planned a holiday in Devon. She was particularly excited about the prospect of exploring Dartmoor. The landscape looked delightfully picturesque in the brochure, with its clapper bridges, prehistoric landmarks and hardy ponies. However, I couldn't reconcile myself to the prospect of staying so far inland. That's typical of someone from the Isle of Wight, my friend scoffed. You always have to cling to the edge. She wasn't wrong. I'm from the coast, and an attractive bit of coast it is too, protected by various national and international designation, mostly for its wildlife. Ryde is an especially enchanting bit of the Solent, and during this blistering heatwave I've been known to twang on my ladies' round cosy and swim in Aptley's warm, clear water. As other parts of the world share images of their horrifically polluted beaches, here, at least, we can thank the European Union for our clean bathing waters. This, of course, doesn't stop people from wanting to do something about the scourge of plastics. Like the rise of veganism, it's trendy nowadays to deny yourself something. So plenty are dipping their toes into an increasingly plastic-free lifestyle. Some of us plunged straight in back in the days of the Wombles. Other folks, including the organisers of Isle of Wight Day, are clacking their litter tongs together, eager to do a beach clean. A great aspiration, but in fact anyone who is paying their council tax here is already participating in a beach clean from the comfort of their recliner, supporting nearly 20 of the island's beaches to be manually or mechanically cleaned throughout the summer. I volunteered at a beach litter pick at Totland, and we barely filled a bin bag between us, practically fighting over the occasional crisp packet and knot of fisherman's twine. We did find the remains of a huge tribute to Mum, presumably leftovers of a scattering at sea, but there wasn't much else on the immaculate, rubbish-free shore. The other evening, as I bobbed about in the bath like briny at Apley, I peered through the crystal water to see a firm, sandy bottom. I became anxious about whether the quality of my local beach will endure after Brexit has snipped through the red tape, legislation which we can thank for making seaside holidays popular again after the dark days of the 1980s, when Britain's coastal resorts were blighted by sewage. Although well-meaning, I hope that beach litter picking will never really need to be a thing here. Even after an extremely well-attended event like last week's Pride, the next day contractors were out in force on the sand, gathering up discarded cups, stray pink feathers and deflated unicorns. However, if kind-hearted volunteers are keen to tidy up after tossers, perhaps they could snap on their rubber gloves and tweeze their litter tongs outside schools or the island's few fast food joints. Not as high profile or sexy as a beach clean, but possibly more necessary until we leave the EU.
And the second article, in my view, is from Jim Gibbons. Hidden facts behind anniversaries. First, some texts exchanged with my sister. Yes, she of the dog Blackie and the James well-beloved towel. Blackie, alas, is no more, but she bequeathed me her towel. Me, big blue, violet perhaps, but certainly not shrinking, flowers on a man-sized bush, 3 or 4 inches across, saucer-shaped when open, with a bobbly 2-inch spike in the middle. What name? Pliz? May not be open yet in the frozen north. That's Pliz, spelt P-L-I-Z. My sister is my authority on all such matters. She? Goodness knows. Me? What a charming name. I should remind you of this each year when the goodness knows comes out. She? Perhaps sending me a picture might help. Me? Certainly not. Goodness knows is quite satisfactory. But for you, dear reader, I will supply a picture, and there's a picture there. NHS anniversary. Founded in 1948, so 70 this year. But in 1943, Winston Churchill instructed his Ministers of Health, the Conservative MP Henry Willink, to prepare a white paper on setting up a national health service to be paid for by taxation and available to all citizens. The white paper was put before Parliament in 1944, and it was agreed it would have to wait until the war was over to be implemented. But in 1945, in the general election that year, the Labour Party was voted into power largely by the fed-up servicemen who all had votes, and so it was the Labour Party, in the portly person of Aneurin Bevan, who set up the NHS. It seems only fair the Conservatives should bear their proper share of the blame or credit. RAF anniversary. Being founded in 1918, the RAF is 100 this year. I was in it, in the first half, indeed since I did my national service in the 1950s. Peacetime, I think, was an anticlimax for the military establishment. My main impression of the RAF was it was not a very welcoming to national servicemen who, willingly or not, was to give up 2 years of his life for the country's good. Their attitude could be summed up as, "We are very important and you lot are something the cat dragged in." It has to be remembered national service was imposed by the government upon the services who would very much prefer to have a volunteer army. Presumably their attitude is changed now and they have only volunteers, otherwise they would be full of masochists. I presume the practice of fathers putting their sons into the army as a boy soldier without their consent has now stopped. There are some common misconceptions about the RAF. For example, the Battle of Britain was fought by officers. Well, at the beginning perhaps, but the supply ran out, and by the end it was mostly sergeants. Many of the pilots were Poles, Czechs and other Europeans who had seen what the Germans had done to their countries and would die happy if they could kill 2 Germans. There were also many from Australia, Canada and New Zealand. Britain never stood alone. During the course of that battle, Bomber Command usually lost more aircrew than Fighter Command did. The bombers were destroying the invasion barges being built across the Channel, a dangerous business. Bomber Command lost a greater percentage of their men than any other units in the war except the German submariners. When an airman lost his nerve after going on missions night after night for perhaps 30 missions and was statistically dead, he was not shot, bad publicity, but his papers were marked LMF, lack of moral fibre. He was demoted and put to cleaning toilets for the duration. Len Deighton's novel, Bomber, vividly depicts the life of aircrews and the bombing process and its effects on the bomber and the bombed. I didn't have to do any of that, largely because of the bravery of the men who did, and I am grateful. 2 quotes for you to identify from different people. Who said, "I have stuffed their mouths with gold"? And, "We are the masters now." Last month's quote, We're all islands shouting lies to each other across seas of misunderstanding. And this was a quote from Kipling.
And now we've got a series of notices about what's on. I begin with 3 short notices. The first one, action on hearing loss will be at Porter Court Sheltered Scheme, Flitcroft Gardens Lake, between 10 and 11 a.m. on Wednesday for a monthly drop-in. Come along for advice, batteries, cleaning and retubing of NHS hearing aids, and you can call 529533. Secondly, the Tea and Chat Club is held at the Holy Family Centre next to St Saviour's Church, Totland, each Monday between 2 and 4. All are welcome. And finally, of this 3, the Isle of Wight Heart to Heart, a club for people with a heart failure condition, meets on Wednesday at the John Cheverton Centre Cafe, Mountbatten, from 10:30 a.m. until noon.
And more what's on. A new community drop-in cafe has opened at the new Broadway Centre in Sandown. Cafe 61 will be open on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. till noon, and everyone will be made very welcome. Set up and run by the Island Vineyard Church, it will be a place where anyone can come and have a free cuppa and snack in a friendly and welcoming environment.
Another set of notices. The exhibition Hidden Heroes, Joe Carstairs and More, is at the Classic Boat Museum Gallery, East Cowes, from 10 to 4 every day. Clary's is at Clarence Road, Evangelical Church, today, Friday at 10:30 a.m. Musician John Shirley will perform. The Cowes Concert Band is at St Mary's Church, Cowes, on Monday at 7:30. A children's Lego club takes place at Cowes Library tomorrow, Saturday, from 10:30 to 12:30.
And music to your ears at the island's Donkey Sanctuary. What better way to while away Sunday afternoon than at the Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary's popular concert in the courtyard. This Sunday you can spend the day wandering around the site, saying hello to the adorable 4-legged residents, grab an ice cream or order a tasty cream tea. Then from 2:30 sit back, relax and enjoy the fabulous Vectis brass band as they fill the summer air with their traditional contemporary brass band sounds. Charity manager Derek Needham said, "We love having Vectis Brass Band here and they play a wide variety of music, so there's something for everyone. Our concert in the courtyard events are always really lovely and everyone is welcome." And I've got another one here which I think is just the advertisement for this year, so I'll just read the advertisement. Concert in the courtyard, Sunday the 29th of July, featuring Vectis Brass Band, starts 2:30, everybody welcome. Donations gratefully accepted. Free entry, free parking. Dylan's Cafe open all day long.
Lake Fun Day will be held next Saturday, August the 3rd, at Fairway Park Football Ground at the Fairway Lake. The event will be opened at 10 a.m. by the island's High Sheriff and Sandown's Town Crier. There will be dance displays, live music, tug of war, and the event will finish at 4 p.m. Refreshments, ice cream and a hog roast will be available. Pony rides, swing boats, face painting, magic, circus skills, football activities and a bouncy castle, with lots more at 1:30 p.m. With lots more. At 1:30 p.m. there will be a fun dog show. £1 entry per dog per category.
And an information point drop-in takes place for the Citizens Advice Isle of Wight at an Aspire Ride information point at Dover Street Ride between 10 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. every Wednesday. During the drop-in, advisors will help you decide the way forward, which may include making a further appointment either face-to-face or over the phone. Open to all members of the community.
And we have an announcement of football sessions for 11 to 15-year-olds, which are on Monday at Queensgate Mugger AstroTurf East Cowes. I think that's the last from What's On, and we're now continuing with the news. TV stars at Yacht Club. Broadcasters John Sargent and Michael Burke helped the Royal London Yacht Club toast its 180th anniversary. They were in Cowes filming a Channel 5 travel show in which they sail around Britain in a 64-foot cutter, Bonadventure, and were invited to join the festivities. The celebrations included an 11-gun salute and 3 cheers at 6 p.m, marking to the hour the start of the club's first race. Held 180 years ago, the day after Queen Victoria's coronation, 7 yachts took part. Guest speaker was former First Sea Lord Admiral Lord West of Spithead, who arrived at the club's London landing aboard the Commodore's boat Matchless II. Around 100 members and guests enjoyed music by the Medina Marching Band.
And another piece of news here. Recognition for villagers who put others first by Laurie Little. Bembridge honoured its residents who went above and beyond for their community, including Christopher Reed, whose bravery during a house fire was commended. The annual Community Champion Awards had numerous nominations in each category, with the winners taking home a glass award designed by Paul Critchley of Sculpture Glass. Christopher was named Chairman's Champion for his heroic actions during a devastating house fire. Following a lightning strike and fire at the family's Egerton Road property in April, Christopher entered the house twice, saving his nan's life and the family's dogs. The Special Recognition Award went to Peter Jeffrey, who is known for arranging fundraising campaigns. He received the award for his actions during the snow. He left Lake in the early hours to walk to Bembridge, which took 1 hour and 40 minutes, then spent all day delivering food to anyone stranded at home. The Harold Lewis Lunch Club was named Champion Volunteer Group. Throughout the year, this group ensured older residents enjoyed a good balanced meal twice a week. A special thank you went to former member Tina Woodling for her contribution. Community champion was John Woodford, who for years has worked tirelessly for Bembridge Heritage Society and is a local historian and has written many books about Bembridge. He generously shares his knowledge with anyone who asks. Green champion was Sheila Weedle for his enthusiasm and outstanding contribution to green issues in the village. She helped organise litter picks, beach cleans, found new footpath projects for the Greentown group and arranged the community walk. Olive Light was champion volunteer, described as always smiling and with amazing community spirit. Her flower displays at the church were a testament to her creativity and always brought pleasure to residents and visitors alike. Jay Chapman of the Village Inn was crowned business champion in a tough category. Jay has supported local groups organised charity events and taken on Bembridge Street Fair. Kera Thomas was named Champion Young Person, her contribution to the Beavers and Friendship Circle. She was described as a committed volunteer with an excellent attitude. Sandra Beanie and David Tallis were awarded Champion Neighbours for their efforts in taking the time and trouble to help their neighbours when they were needed of support.
And that's our final article for today. So it's goodbye from Pauline.
And goodbye from Leicester.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, a new UK standard for assistance dogs. We'll be finding out why it's needed and the possible implications for guide dog owners. And what would you do with $25,000 to come up with an adventure?
Oh, and I'm over, and it should be almost home, safe and dry.
Well, how does hanging off a sea stack at 400 feet sound? The blind adventurer Red Sails, been there, done that, will be telling you what's next. But first, there was a time when guide dogs were the only assistance dog in town. The first training school in the UK opened back in the 1930s, and the dog guiding a blind man or woman quickly became a familiar and much admired sight. But in more recent times, dogs are increasingly being used to help other groups of disabled people. Those with hearing loss, mobility difficulties, people with epilepsy and with emotional problems. Well, that's now led to the idea that there ought to be some kind of national standard to which dog and owner partnerships would have to adhere when operating in public. As the plans stand, dogs from the Guide Dogs organisation will be regarded as meeting the standard. We've now seen the draft consultation document, which contains a flavour of the voluntary assessment which might be undertaken in order for a dog to meet the proposed new UK standard.
Noise distraction. The dog should remain composed when something is dropped behind them. They can show a startle response, but should not show any continued or disproportionate anxious behaviour after approximately 30 seconds of the startle stimulus. At the end of the public access assessment, the dog applicant partnership will be classed as pass, defer or not suitable.
That was drawn up by the working group from the Office for Disability Issues. One of the groups they're talking to is Assistance Dogs UK. That's an umbrella group which includes guide dogs. Their chair is Peter Gorbing, and I asked him why this new standard is necessary after many years without one.
Well, I think there's several reasons. Firstly, there's no legal clarity really about what constitutes an assistance dog in the UK. So I think everyone recognises that it is a dog that's well trained to work alongside a person with a disability, but there is no legal definition of it. As you said in your introduction, demand is growing. There's different organisations setting up. And in fact, many of the newer people who are training them dogs themselves are saying, look, actually, we want to know what the standard is that we need to reach.
What evidence is there that there's really a demand for this? It's been described as something that business wants, but do we know that?
Well, one of the problems we have at the moment is that people who run businesses really don't understand what their legal obligations are in relation to public access rights for assistance dogs. So I speak a lot to shop owners, to people, for example, like airlines, who are saying, look, we're very happy to widen access for people with assistance dogs, but we just don't really understand what the current rules are. And because there's nothing to tell us, we have to, as the business owner, we have to make the assessment whether the dog is trained to a level that we think is acceptable. Now, you can imagine when you're taking a dog onto a plane, that's a pretty big ask to ask of airlines. So I think we deserve to give them more clarity so that they're able to take their legal responsibilities seriously.
One of the biggest examples that affect guide dog owners, of course, are A, restaurants and B, taxis. Is this something that would help with that, or is it going to provide them with more excuses to refuse to serve people?
Well, I think that's a very good example, Peter, where I do think that it will help to massively clarify the situation. because it's so unclear at the moment, there's lots of wriggle room for people to get out and say, oh, well, I didn't understand the system. We need to get a system that people are absolutely crystal clear what their legal obligations are.
You don't think it's enough to have a law, which we actually have, that says they must take guide dog owners and then enforce it?
Well, yes, but the trouble is that there are lots of grey edges around the edge of that, and consequently there's a relatively small number of cases ever get taken, and a relatively smaller number of cases that ever get won around this. So in principle, yes, but in practice there is too much wiggle room.
We mentioned that there was going to be some kind of test, and that's all being discussed at the moment, but what kind of things would a test cover?
Well, I think it's probably better to call it an assessment in a way than a test, because it's going to be looking at really whether someone working alongside with their dog has done the kind of training and the preparation to take the dog into different public places, their calmness around traffic, ability to negotiate crowds, so that actually they can really say, look, we know this dog can work safely in a public place, and public access really isn't and mustn't be an issue, because we have to make sure that public access rights are opened up to many more people with an assistance dog.
Not everyone is happy about this idea. David Cavell is the chair of the Pet Education and Behaviour Council.
My worry is that there will be pressure from some of the major charities who want to stay in control of their funds, that's what it boils down to, and some animal trainers who are pushing it forward merely for their own advantage and not because there is any perceived or established need.
Peter Gorbing, has David Cavell got a point? Is this a case of your organisation, maybe other organisations, trying to big up your parts and be the arbiter of what is and what isn't an assistance dog?
No, I think that's so far from the reality. I mean, firstly, David's wrong. The initiative wasn't from us. The initiative has come from other organisations, owner trainers, organisations that aren't part of at the moment, the accredited system. So we've been asked to be part of that because we bring a lot of experience and skills to the ideas. But no, we're very happy that there should be many more assistance dogs owners. We just want it to be right for people and for dogs.
Can we talk specifically about guide dogs for a moment? Now, guide dogs, the organisation, are part of your organisation. They're affiliated. They've told us they're happy for the consultation process to take its course, and of course, as plans stand, their partnerships won't be required to take this test. But I can imagine some people, some guide dog owners, thinking, yeah, but how long for? You know, once you've got a bureaucracy and you've got these kinds of tests in place, how long is it going to be before this becomes not voluntary but required?
Well, the idea at the moment is that organisations that are part of ADA UK that have either been accredited by the International Guide Dog Federation or Assistance Dogs International, they'll be grandfathered into the system. I mean, partly because the sheer volume of dogs that they're training, that it's going to be quite difficult initially. I think there's a way of looking at this very negatively. To me, this really opens up the possibilities. I don't think there is any likelihood on the horizon. I mean, the government have said there's going to be no legislation around this. Who knows? Maybe you're right eventually that some frameworks will be put in place. But it's very much about people saying that we want to do the right things, and actually we need to develop a degree of self-regulation. That's what organisations do.
But there's talk in this consultation document of partnerships being passed or classed as not suitable, successful dogs getting a chip to prove that they have passed and are regarded as satisfactory. You know, it does sound potentially scary, almost Big Brotherish.
I don't think it needs to. I see what you're saying, and there's not everything in this document, in this consultation, that ADA UK would necessarily agree with. But I think that's the questions that we're out for consultation. We want to find out what kind of people think. We want to get feedback on that. But the reality is that dogs are microchipped in this country. That's a legal necessity, and if by doing that we're creating some kind of register eventually of dogs that are assistance dogs, that may or may not be a good idea, and that's really what we want to get feedback from people on.
This is being described as a voluntary system.
Yes.
At the moment.
Yeah.
it begs the question, who would volunteer to have this done if they didn't need to? There are, the organisations are going to have their own rules. May people not just see that as one extra element of hoops they don't have to go through?
On the basis of the number of people who come to our organisations asking how they can get their dogs assessed because they want to have a card in their hands that says their dog is recognised as an assistance dog, I think there's going to be actually a lot of people who want to do that.
That was Peter Gorbing. Well, the Department for Work and Pensions said they were encouraging the assistance dog sector to work together to create a UK standard which can act as the mark of a well-trained assistance dog. And Guide Dogs told us that as they are exempted from the assessment, as it's currently outlined, they didn't feel it was their place to comment further. Now, I'm just taking a moment to ask for your help with something for an upcoming episode of In Touch, and it's a bit different. We're diving into the world of science fiction, a genre which, from Gulliver's Travels to the latest blockbusters like A Quiet Place, has never lost its fascination with blindness.
He leaned closer. You know what? I'm blind. That's what I am. Blind as a bat. Everybody just blind as a bat. Except you. Why are you blind as a bat? I don't know, I told him. It's that bloody comet. That's what's done it. Green shooting stars and now everybody's blind as a bat. You see green shooting stars? No, I admitted. There you are. Proves it. You didn't see them. You aren't blind.
We heard there John Wyndham's classic, The Day of the Triffids. Science fiction films, books, comics are infused with stories about blindness and visual impairment, from H.G. Wells to X-Men. We want you to tell us about the sci-fi that has influenced you and what you've thought of it. You can email In Touch at bbc.co.uk, and there are more ways to contact us. You can hear them at the end of the programme. Now, blind author and adventurer Red Sail has just taken on a challenge which is likely to test him to the limit. And that's the idea. He's one of 3 winners of an international award worth $25,000. He had to come up with a challenge which would change the perceptions of what visually impaired people can achieve. If you're scared of heights, block your ears.
Coming out over a bulge that bulges out about 2 feet, so my legs are about 2 feet in front of me underneath the bulge. My upper body is leaning out. I've got hold of something with one hand and the other. Oh, the end is nearly in sight. Well, it would be if I could see it. Oh! Is there a foothold anywhere?
Where you got the down to your left, that's good. First blind man on top of the old man ahoy. How does it feel?
Absolutely bloody marvellous. Dreams do come true.
Well, that was Red Sail, 450 feet up the Old Man of Hoy 5 years ago. Now that's a sheer sea stack off the Orkney Islands. But climbing is only one element in the challenge he's set himself.
My project is an extreme blind triathlon. I want to climb another sea stack, surprisingly enough, called Ambuchel, which is in the far northwest corner of Scotland, just beneath Cape Wrath. And just getting there is a challenge. It's a 10-mile cross-country, off-road tandem ride to get to the top of the cliff. Then we abseil 200 metres down to the water's edge, strip off, swim 30 metres to the base of the sea stack, and then we've got 90 minutes to climb 213 metres and abseil back off before the tide comes in and cuts us off.
And why this particular project?
It's the third and most extreme of the big 3 Scottish sea stacks. And to be perfectly honest, without the financial backing of the Holman Prize, there's just no way I could even attempt it. Just getting the kit up there is going to be a major project, and to be honest, I also want to film it for posterity, just to show what it is possible to do, even if you have lost your sight.
So how are you going to prepare for it?
Well, fortunately, I'm not doing it until next Midsummer's Day. So I've got the best part of a year to lose the flab, give up the beer and curry, and just do an awful lot of indoor climbing training, a lot of outdoor tandem training, and keep up with my mad outdoor swimming activities that I do most weekends anyway.
What's going to be the toughest part of this challenge?
I think actually just doing it against the clock. I'm quite a slow and methodical climber, and knowing that with every passing minute the tide is coming in and that I might have to spend the night on a sea stack with my climbing partner Matthew is, well, it'll spur me along to success, I hope.
And you mentioned Matthew. I mean, how much help are you going to need to do this?
It'll be Matthew and me, an adventure cameraman called Keith Partridge, who filmed things like Touching the Void, and also a professional mountain guide called Nick. They're basically as the rope safety experts, just to make sure that we don't do anything that could end with an unfortunate outcome.
Now, the prize was given by the San Francisco Lighthouse, which is an American organisation that helps visually impaired people. It's called the Holman Prize. Who was Holman?
James Holman was an 18th century British explorer who went blind whilst he was serving in Nelson's navy. And he was sent to a sort of retirement home in a monastery and just got itchy feet. And so he decided to take himself off to China and India all by himself and just travelled around the world and wrote up his experiences in a journal, and has actually become quite famous amongst the exploring fraternity as the blind adventurer. And so the prize was named in his honour when it was founded in 2017.
Now, I know you're aware of the irony that you could well end up succeeding and still find yourself next day walking into a bollard in your local street, or pouring water everywhere because you're making a cup of tea, all those irritations of blindness. What do you think is the real value of this kind of extreme sporting challenge to blind people? Does it make us feel better, or does it just make us feel even more inadequate?
I spent 20 years nursing my wounds and feeling disenabled and disinclined to go out and challenge myself. And actually it was only by getting back into climbing that I felt any sense of physical improvement. I think my sight loss had begun to rule the way that I viewed myself. And actually to get better at something is kind of taking one back for the good guys. And if all I do is encourage somebody to take up yoga or Pilates or tandem bike riding and just get out of the house and discover the joy of doing a physical activity with other people and discover that other people can be incredibly helpful, then I think that's job done. So, OK, I know I'm doing it in a rather extreme and eye-catching way or headline-grabbing way, but for me, it's just important that other people don't waste years of beating themselves up on the sofa going, why me?
Red Sail, very best of luck. We'd like to keep tabs on your progress. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter.
And that's it for tonight. Whether you're climbing a sea stack or walking your guide dog, we always welcome your reactions. Just don't mix the two. You can call our action line for 24 hours after the programme on 0800 044 044. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk, or you can click on Contact Us on our website. And you can also download tonight's edition of In Touch and many previous programmes too. From me, Peter Wight, producer Kevin Core and the team, goodbye.